Hi, folks. Thanks for joining us. We are going to give folks a minute to hop on, but thank you all so much for joining us. We're excited to get started here. And yeah, we'll give it another 30 seconds to a minute before we go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone. If you're just joining now, thanks so much for joining us. We're just going to give it another minute before we go ahead and get started. Super excited for today's program, and I hope you are too. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you all so much for being with us. I am Olivia with EDF Action, the advocacy partner of the Environmental Defense Fund. I am thrilled to be here, and happy Earth Month. Today, we have an exciting program for you that highlights many of our amazing partner organizations. These partners have unique missions, perspectives, and specialties to bring to the table, but they all share a common goal, which is to facilitate the clean energy transition. During today's event, we'll be discussing what each of these organizations are doing to advance clean energy progress, what's on the horizon for clean energy businesses and innovations, and how these leading climate professionals have gotten to where they are today. Throughout this event, we'll also talk about the Inflation Reduction Act and how this bill has impacted industries and businesses. If you haven't heard, the Inflation Reduction Act is the single largest investment in fighting climate change in history, and it passed last summer. Many of our EDF Action partners and activists helped us get that bill over the finish line. So thank you to all of you here with us today for contributing to that historic win. Over the next hour, you'll hear from 4 of our wonderful partner organizations: Clean Fuels Michigan, One Sun Solar, North Carolina Business Council, and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. If you have questions throughout the program, please add them to the YouTube Q&A box or in the comments on Facebook, and we will do our best to respond to your comments and questions in real time on those platforms. And now we can go ahead and get into it. So Chris, there you are. I'm so thrilled to be here today with Chris Carnevale, the Climate Advocacy Director at the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. Chris, thank you so much for being here. Could you tell me a little bit about Southern Alliance for Clean Energy and the role that you play in the organization?
Sure. Thanks for having me. The Southern Alliance for Clean Energy is a nonprofit organization that advocates for clean energy and clean transportation policy throughout the Southeast United States. And I am the Climate Advocacy Director, so I help with some of our efforts around public education and public engagement and helping our members make sure their voices are heard with decision makers.
That's great. Thank you. So there was a massive collective effort in the environmental community to get the investments in Biden's clean energy plan made into law. What was the role that Southern Alliance for Clean Energy played in this major accomplishment? And what did you learn from this years-long effort?
Yeah, so it was definitely a years-long effort. That's an accurate way to put it. It came out of, SACE has been doing clean energy and climate policy work for decades. So, the background is very long and, involves decades worth of advocacy for clean energy and climate federal policy. But the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law really came into focus in like 2020 with, candidate Biden's clean energy and climate campaign plans. And then once he was in office with the, evolution of the American Jobs Plan, then the BIF, which was the Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework, then Build Back Better Act, and then finally Inflation Reduction Act. And so through this kind of, probably 2 to 3 year time span, SACE was working on educating our members and the public and the press about, different policy designs. And then, of course, also making sure our members were speaking up with their elected officials voicing support for strong clean energy and climate policies. And then, to the question of what did I learn, I think the main thing is, for me personally, just I was left with the impression of how much that it really takes a movement to get big things done like this. Like I said, it was decades of advocacy to get to where the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law were even, able to be considered like they were. It took a movement of people, from digital activists who were, sharing social media posts to make sure their friends weren't missing out on the news, to, people demonstrating in the streets, folks, calling and meeting with their elected officials, of course, people showing up at the ballot box and making sure their voices are counted. And then, of course, also, some people running for office and getting into elected office and, using their positions to make clean energy and climate policies a reality.
Absolutely. Yeah, very much a collective effort. So SACE and EDF Action both run large grassroots field efforts. Can you talk a little bit about the role that grassroots advocacy played in accomplishing these legislative victories? And how can grassroots activists continue to play a role in the fight against climate change?
Yeah, so grassroots advocacy was very critical to, the Inflation Reduction Act. Climate policy has faced a major headwind for a long time, being opposed by major moneyed interests, fossil fuel companies, some of the most profitable and powerful companies in the history of civilization, opposing meaningful climate legislation. So, where they have money power and political power, the climate movement has people power. And so when, the people power showed up, people showed up consistently and made sure that democracy delivered for them. That's how we got the Inflation Reduction Act passed. So, grassroots advocacy is completely critical to the progress that we're making. How can people move forward? I think it's important for folks to recognize, and I think most people do recognize this, but because you get a bill passed doesn't mean that we can, stop and say job well done and pat ourselves on the back. We can do that, but we can't stop there. Now the Inflation Reduction Act gives us the tools that we need, many of the tools, I should say, to make really big cuts in harmful pollution. But, basically it's a set of tools and we need to work with them and make sure that they are implemented effectively and equitably.
Yes. So that leads into my next question, which is, we find ourselves in an entirely new landscape today than we did several years ago, or even just a year ago. So how does SPACE as an organization see itself pivoting to ensure that these major investments get implemented?
Yeah. So, like I said, progress on climate and clean energy has had a headwind so long. But, with policy changes, the wind is now at our backs, and there's actually a major opportunity for the clean energy transition to just get totally turbocharged. But it's not going to happen on its own. We need to make sure it happens effectively and equitably. And I'll share one example. You might hear that the Inflation Reduction Act is like $369 billion in climate funding. That number, a large portion of that, the majority of that portion is based on tax credits, which are uncapped. And that means that's an estimation, but it could be much less than that number, and it could be much more depending on utilization. So we need to make sure that the tools are utilized and they're utilized well, for the remaining, for the $100+ billion of, other grants and financial assistance. It's going to do good, but it's not going to go to the places where it makes the most impact unless people and communities and businesses are putting their hands up and saying, this is what's needed. So, SACE as an organization is organizing under the banner of what we're calling the clean energy generation, to help people who want to be a part of this movement to do what they can from the place where they are, so that we can all come together and secure the future we want.
Absolutely. Can you tell me a little bit more about clean energy generation?
Yeah. So the clean energy generation. So I'll back up and say different generations have faced unique challenges and circumstances in history and have responded in different ways that have varying degrees of affecting the history of human civilization, changing the course of history. So, now where we are with climate pollution being at the greatest concentrations in the atmosphere that it ever has been in the history of civilization, our generation will define the fate of humanity and the fate of all the species we share planet Earth with. So the clean energy generation is the idea that our generation, and I mean that in an inclusive way, not just, no matter how young or how old you are, but our generation is coming together to choose the path of addressing the climate crisis and using the tools we have to, have clean energy powered communities where we have clean air and clean water and good jobs and affordable bills and a future where we can all thrive. So, just like in past generations, people have come together in common purpose to make big things happen. We can do that too. And everyone has a role to play in the clean energy generation, whether it's, doing things in our personal lives, in making home energy improvements in our households, or if it's coming together in collective ways, like in our communities, like showing up at our church, at the city council meeting, at the utility commission meeting, and making sure that these tools are utilized as effectively and as widely as possible. We all have a role to play, and so we're hoping to help organize people under that banner of the clean energy generation, that we will come together to be the generation to secure the stable climate we need.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here and telling us about the incredible and really inspiring work that you do with SACE. Now I want to move on to the other interviews. We've got a few more. So thanks, Chris, and let's move on.
If I were y'all, you'd be the Saudi Arabia of solar.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mark Peckham, Nevada organizer with EDF Action. I'm here on the ground in Las Vegas, and today I'm headed out to interview Louise Helding, the Vice President of One Sun Solar. One Sun Solar is an awesome Nevada partner helping to facilitate our nation's clean energy transition through solar installation in our sunny state. Louise is going to speak with us today about the importance of a clean energy transition, her work in the solar industry, and the consumer and industry benefits of clean energy alternatives. Now, come with me as we delve into the interview.
You have a long and varied career. Can you talk a little bit about what brought you to the clean energy space?
Absolutely. I can tell you that it started back in the around 2004, 2005. You may recall back then that was about when Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth was out and was made into a movie and everything else. I mean, it had really, the information that was contained in that really grabbed me. And it was something that you just felt compelled to do something about. It's like, oh my gosh, this is happening. What should we do? And it's always, well, what can I do? And of course, nothing evolved from that. It was just, well, what can I do? Because a lot of people look at those big problems and you think, well, what can I do? I'm one person. Well, but it was very heightened awareness. So very fertile ground between my ears and my business partner. We were both very concerned and wanted to see what we could do. Well, the next thing that happened is we had this Nevada Development Authority dinner that it took place here in town. And the speaker at that year was none other than President Bill Clinton. And he came and gave the most riveting speech and totally laid out for everyone to see what he thought the best thing we could do for this community to diversify our economy, which in Las Vegas, we've always talked about we need to diversify our economy. That's been like a number one thing that people have said, but very little has ever happened. Well, Bill Clinton said, if I were y'all, you'd be the Saudi Arabia of solar.
Okay, I love that.
And he laid out just how much solar energy we have here. All of this was just, it was such a reveal for me to get that information and to see that, here we are sitting in a gold mine of solar energy. And yet you looked around and no one was mining. And so that really was what compelled us. We just kept thinking about, wow, this is really amazing. Should we get solar? What? But this is back 2005. There
Right,
wasn't a whole lot going
That's the
on.
really early days of the
It
industry.
really was. But ultimately, we decided that we would start this company, and we did in 2007. We started One Sun Solar Electric, and it was directly because of the inspiration of that dinner
Okay.
that we are in business today.
All right. So could you tell us a little about One Sun Solar?
Sure. It's One Sun Solar Electric is a local Southern Nevada full licensed electrical contracting company, but we specialize in solar. What we've tried to do is get into that clean energy space so that while we specialize in solar, we also do LED retrofits, which we've done all over the state, all over several states actually. We've also gotten into electric vehicle charging stations and those kinds of things. So that whole sustainable energy area, that's really where we have built this business, and that's where we live and grow and really enjoy doing business.
Right. And that's a whole paradigm with those technologies feeding into each other.
It is, and it's the perfect time to do it.
Whereas, on the one hand, we have the opportunity to make Nevada, as you said, the Saudi Arabia of clean energy, of solar power. At the same time, that's now feeding into more and more of our our vehicles, where we're helping produce a lot of the nation's electric vehicles. And
yes, that huge battery manufacturing company up in Reno. Oh my gosh, lithium-ion batteries are just a huge thing in this state now.
So the next question is, what would you say are some of the roadblocks facing businesses and communities in making the transition to clean energy?
Well, I think that any time that you are a pioneering industry, I mean, this is a nascent technology, it's very disruptive technology. So you are butting heads with a lot of things that are the norms that are already in place, whether it be utility companies or just the way people are used to paying for their energy and receiving their energy. There's a lot of those norms that this industry actually has had to break through. So that's the kind of thing that has just taken time. But the things that have really helped have been some of the things that government has done, because people have solar aspirations, but those solar aspirations can't come true if you can't afford it.
Right.
And so what the common denominator is with most of the customers that I visit with is, well, how are we going to pay for it? Because everybody wants it. Of course, it just makes sense, whether you're doing it to be saving great, clean energy, or if you're just doing it to save money. I mean, it's all really important to people, and they're highly motivated. So having an opportunity like the 30% tax credit has been critical.
So it's no secret that here in Nevada it can get very hot. As we witness extreme weather and temperature continue to rise, can you talk a little bit about the importance of clean energy transition as it pertains to your state?
I think that our state has an amazing pulse, if you will. If you want to see how climate change is affecting us, the heat is certainly something everybody can say, well, it's always been hot. But the thing that you can't say has always happened is when you fly over Lake Mead, it has never been that low. And we are really experiencing record low levels, even in spite of this boon of great snowfall that we've had in snowpack. So, we live in a place that is particularly vulnerable to those kinds of things. And I think people here all have that worry meter, that when you see the level of the lake going down, the worry starts going up.
How has the recently passed Clean Energy Plan, so both the bipartisan infrastructure bill and the Inflation Reduction Act, impacted your business? How do you see it impacting your business in the years to come? Well,
the wonderful thing about the Inflation Reduction Act is that 30% tax credit is now established for a 10-year period. It will not expire until 2033. Up until now, it's been sort of paper-clipped, add another year, but that doesn't give you certainty, especially when you're trying to build a business. And so having that in place really gives a business that much security that at least in your marketplace reserved. The other thing that's really going to be remarkable as more and more of these things from the infrastructure bill roll out is all the EV charging stations. That's going to be huge. And so obviously bills get passed, but it takes a little minute for everything to roll out. And so we're really eager and excited to see how that will change our community and also our business opportunities. The other thing that people are not really familiar with too is that there is, through the Department of Agriculture, there are some really amazing grants that have been available for businesses that are in smaller rural areas. Well, they have a grant for renewable energy called a REAP grant. And that has historically offered you 25% of the cost of a system for a business, a for-profit business in a rural area, a grant for 25% of the cost of it to be reimbursed to them, writing them a check saying, here you go, 25%. So if you had the 25% and then the 30% tax credit, what a gift. But wait, there's more, because in the Inflation Reduction Act, they actually re-looked at what they could do to help more rural communities really be able to turn more, to solar energy and make it even more affordable. So they actually raised it to 40%.
Wow.
40% of the cost of the system will be given back to you in a grant through this REAP grant if you're a rural small business. There's a few other requirements, but it's very available to so many businesses. So this is one of those opportunities that I wish more people knew about, because
absolutely,
that is an incredible opportunity.
So, I think we in the environmental community often talk about kind of the big picture benefits of the transition to clean energy into solar. We talk about, saving the planet,
right.
and that's a little zoomed out, but at the level of the individual consumer, what are the benefits to transitioning to solar?
Well, they are going to know that when they go to bed at night and they've watched a terrible documentary on the planet and what climate change is doing, that they've done something, and they've done something significant. But then every month when they get their power bill and they say, wow, this is hardly anything. My poor neighbors are paying these big bills and mine is, less than $20. That's really remarkable. I mean, last month we got our power bill for this great big 8,000 square foot building was $50.
Wow. That's less than my power bill for a small apartment.
Exactly. And if we can run this whole building that way, how remarkable is that? So, when people are able to convert to solar energy and have that more sustainable energy platform that they run their whole life through, it saves them so much money. And it's one of those things that until they've tried it, they won't really understand it.
And in addition to just being cheaper, it's also a more stable price, right? Whereas those of us who don't have solar yet, myself included, can see our prices just rock up and down, completely unpredictable month to month.
Oh, this year I can tell you, NV Energy raised commercial rates for a building like mine. Our kilowatt hour rate used to be 6 cents. Now it's over 9. That's a huge percentage increase, and all of that was done to the residential consumer as well. Everything has just been happening though over the fall and the winter, where nobody really sees it because that's our lowest time of our lowest period of the year that we're using the least power at all. So a little power bill bump here or there, it just portends what's going to happen next month. We're hitting 85 degrees, this finally at the end of April, when those 105, 110 degree days start coming and you get so many of them in a row, everybody's power bills are going to be coming in. People will really be begging for help. And I think that's when not only will all of our phones keep ringing, but that's when people will turn to solar And that 30% tax credit's going to be there to soften their fall when they have to write the check to get this done, to make that transition.
Mm-hmm. And then the final question we have is, what can Nevadans do to ensure that the funding coming out of the massive clean energy plan gets implemented successfully?
You know, that's the thing is, one of the things I've been very aware of, because I've been involved in advocacy and legislation for years and years and years. And the thing that's so frustrating about it is you can pass the best bill in the world, but it just sits there, and if it doesn't get implemented or if people don't know about it, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So they really need to know that these opportunities exist, and they need to know how they can take advantage of them. Well, that's the one thing about EDF. I mean, they are just one of the best educational arms that exist.
Director of North Carolina Political Programs here at EDF. And I'm here with Vicki Lee Parker High, who's the Executive Director of the North Carolina Business Council. We're going to discuss not only her work and the businesses she engages with, but also how these businesses can benefit from the investments in the Clean Energy Plan. Vicki, welcome and thanks for joining us for this conversation. I guess we'll start. I'll just say off the bat that I'm excited to learn a bit more about you and the North Carolina Business Council. Could you tell me a little more about what your organization does and what brought you to this work?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you, Dustin. And I also want to just thank Environmental Defense Fund for this opportunity to share this information and talk about this very important topic. The North Carolina Business Council was formed back in 2014 by a group of business owners who really wanted to bring the business voice to issues like environmental justice and other social issues that also impacted the business community, but they felt really lacked that business voice and that business perspective. So they formed the North Carolina Business Council to elevate and amplify their voice, and also to inject, some of the solutions that they felt were needed to address some of these issues that could help businesses grow as well as the communities grow. So our mission is to connect, empower, and influence business leaders to build a vibrant economy that protects our natural resources, it benefits our communities, and benefits all North Carolinians. And so we've been doing that now for the past 6 years. And we have about 5 focus areas, but the one that I'm going to focus and talk about today is the, environmental justice and clean energy and all those things. We kind of, is a huge umbrella and a lot of issues that fall under that umbrella. But one of the areas for us that intersect with our mission is looking at environmental justice and making sure that the business's story is told in that picture. So we hear a lot about environmental injustice, and we hear about the communities that are impacted, and the lack of clean water and all the other issues that go along with that. And we hear that from the perspective of the communities and the neighborhoods, but we don't always hear the businesses in those communities and how they're impacted by what happens when you have an area that's a high flood area, or an area that's has been repeatedly impacted by climate disasters. What happens to those businesses there? They have to, rebuild and restart and also continue to serve the community. So part of what the North Carolina Business Council does is to hear those issues and to amplify those issues with our state leaders, with our national leaders. We convened a number of roundtables in the past several years, where we have brought together our business leaders, particularly in those disadvantaged communities, and brought them together with our state leaders and with our congressional and national leaders, so that they can hear what those experiences are like and how those businesses are impacted when there is a flooding or a natural disaster, and how they have their unique needs to get back up and running and serving the community and serving their customers. And so we've really have, made some headway on that in the last few years. And we're going to talk more, I guess, why we're here today is to talk about, the environmental bills that have been passed, the federal actions that have been taken, but to really try to build on that momentum that we've started years ago, raising it, trying to raise awareness on this issue. But now the moment is meeting this new energy that's coming from, the federal government.
Well, tell me some more about the challenges that the businesses that you work with, the challenges that they face.
Yeah, so in general, businesses, one thing that's, I guess, ubiquitous for all of them, aside from funding and growing, is finding the talent and finding the skilled workers. That is still a big deal. And particularly now as we are putting more energy into addressing some of these environmental issues and climate issues, we want to find workers, skilled workers who understand these issues, who have the skills to help. If you are a business engaged in the clean economy, you want to make certain you might be a business owner and you're really eager to engage, but you also have to have the team and the skilled workers to make certain that you get there. So I think that's a challenge, I don't say it's just for business, it's really for the state and for the nation, is to make certain that we are, producing skilled workforce to also meet the time that and the challenges that we're facing in this environmental, crisis. So I think that's going to be a challenge for all of us to really keep our eye on the ball. I think it's important that we let businesses know that they're not in this by themselves, and that our state leaders, are really trying to look at ways to skill up our workforce so that they can be there and be available for these businesses that are trying to engage and address some of the climate issues that we're facing.
What are some of your goals specifically for 2023?
Yeah, for North Carolina Business Council, so we do a lot of advocacy and education. I think our top goals, number one, is letting businesses be aware of the resources that are out there. When we did a survey recently, we learned that a lot of businesses weren't aware of all the resources that's available to them. And I think it's because it's been decentralized. So part of what we've done is to work with our Secretary of State, work with other community partners to really help businesses find a central place to get information or to do a better job in getting the resources to them. North Carolina has a wealth of resources for small businesses. I'm so proud to be part of that ecosystem, but it's no good if the businesses don't know about it. So I think one of our big goals this year is to really kind of let the businesses know what's available for them. I think we've done a lot of great work to help them, but now we've just got to make sure they're connected to those resources. The state has made steps to help centralize that information a little bit more. There's a long way to go, but to make it easier for businesses to know what's available. So amongst all the additional advocacy work we do, I think that's the top priority, is the businesses need to know what's there for them.
What role can these businesses play in implementing President Biden's investments to ensure a swift and prosperous transition to clean energy?
So absolutely. So again, I think it's our job to make sure the information is there. It's their job to get the information and to implement it. What I'm excited is because, with what's happening with the environmental funding that's coming and all the attention that we're getting on the federal level to address some of these issues regarding climate and the environment, is that it is creating that momentum. And it's making it front and center for businesses now to think about. So I think that is a big plus. Prior to this, it was kind of a scattered thought. And there were some businesses that were really gung-ho and very engaged in tracking their carbon footprint, understanding what steps they could take to reduce their energy and increase clean energy. But now I think this has put that emphasis for all businesses to start thinking about it. And so I think it's incumbent upon businesses to, seize this opportunity to, take a look, no matter what type of business they have, if they're a law firm, if they're, run a barbershop, or if they're a major, wind, producer, regardless of your industry, there's always a way to look and see how you can participate in, zeroing out your waste, zeroing out your input in pollution. So we want to make certain that we engage them. That was my timer. So we want to make certain that they know how they can fit in this big picture.
So the Biden administration has created a goal that 40% of the overall benefits of these federal investments will flow to disadvantaged communities. What are some of the challenges facing this goal, and how can we ensure that this goal is met?
Well, great question. And I think the biggest challenge is understanding that it is a goal. It is not a mandate. It is a commitment, and it's an important one. But that means what we have to understand as business leaders is that now we have to hold agencies accountable to that. So this is not automatic. And I worry some people think, the administration said it and it's going to be done. And that's not the case. We have to make certain that the agencies are following through on this commitment and this goal. And we have to make certain that once the funding is moved from the federal level to the state level, that our local municipalities are also following through on this commitment and this goal. So the North Carolina Business Council, we do see that. We take that personally as a personal mandate to make certain that that is happening, and connecting the businesses' voice to ensure that. So I think that's, the blessing and the challenge at the same time. I think it's awesome that we have that. We have agencies where that is a top priority, and that 40% of those funding should go to those disadvantaged communities. The other important thing with that is that, again, making certain that businesses, particularly small businesses, are part of that are part of those contracts that are going to come from that. These fundings are going to go to build our roads, build our infrastructure, restore, water systems, all these aspects that the funding is going to go to. Businesses can be plugged into all parts of that. And we want to make sure that those businesses who participate, that is done so in an equitable way, that it's not just the same contractors getting the same contracts, but that there really is an effort to bring in new businesses, particularly our more diverse businesses, our women-owned businesses, our veteran-owned businesses, our disabled-owned businesses, and making certain that that is top priority as we implement this real historic moment. I mean, the funding is, we're talking with over $1.2 trillion in the infrastructure bill. That's a lot of funding that's coming out into our communities. So we really want to make certain that everyone gets an opportunity to participate in that growth who wants to.
Sounds good to me. Well, thank you, Vicki, for being a part of this conversation and doing all this great work for North Carolina and our wonderful people.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My name is Tina Catron. I am the Michigan Grassroots Organizer for EDF Action, and I'm here today with Jane McCurry. Jane, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thanks so much, Tina. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Jane McCurry, and I'm the Executive Director of Clean Fuels Michigan. Clean Fuels Michigan is a nonprofit trade association dedicated to advancing the future of clean mobility here in Michigan. So we work with industry participants and advocacy partners to make sure that Michigan is taking advantage of policy opportunities to deploy more electric vehicles and create good paying jobs in the state.
All right. And Jane, tell us a little bit about what inspired you to do this type of work.
I grew up in Metro Detroit. My parents worked for Ford. I have a strong family history in the automotive industry. Actually, my great-great-grandfather immigrated to Detroit to work on the line in the Henry Ford facility. So, that automotive passion really runs deep. And I'm able to marry that with a passion for the environment and preserving the Great Lakes and all of the natural lands that we have here in Michigan in this clean mobility role. So that's what I bring to the table, and I'm just so proud to be continuing that family legacy in the automotive industry, but in a different way.
That's amazing. I'm so glad to hear that you have such deep roots in the Michigan and Detroit area. It's amazing. So Clean Fuels Michigan played a major role in getting the BIL and the IRA bills passed. Can you talk a little bit about the effort that went into this major accomplishment?
Yeah, it's so exciting, and I think first and foremost, it is a team effort. Industry participants, advocacy partners from around the country advocated for these investments for a really long time. And Clean Fuels Michigan, I'm just so grateful that we were able to be a part of that chorus of voices. We've worked with EDF for a number of years to advocate for investments in the bipartisan infrastructure law and in the Inflation Reduction Act. And actually last summer we went to Washington, D.C. with EDF Action, and we were able to talk to Michigan's congresspeople about how important the clean mobility industry is to Michigan. More than 20% of Michigan jobs are tied to the automotive industry in one way or another. So we knew that this wasn't an industry that could be left out of those big energy bills. And so, it's just super exciting. I mean, historic investments in clean mobility and clean energy that are really going to benefit Michigan communities.
Absolutely. So what are your organization's goals for this year and beyond now that we've made those big investments with the IRA? What's next?
Yeah, well, we need to make sure we're taking advantage of all of those investments. So we're really focused on how do we make sure that Michigan is harnessing all of those available incentives and opportunities to deploy clean mobility and the infrastructure that's required in efficient and equitable ways. One of the things we're really focusing on too in that effort is how do we broaden the conversation to include not just passenger vehicle travel, but medium and heavy duty vehicles, making sure that we're electrifying state fleet vehicles and school buses and taking advantage of non-passenger vehicle travel too.
Yeah.
Additionally, we are advocating for additional state level incentives to complement those federal incentives. So Michigan has a budget surplus. Governor Whitmer proposed some really exciting items in her state budget. So we're making sure that those are signed into the budget when it gets signed in late June. And then finally, we're pursuing some additional policies that can complement those two things. Incentives, we need all of those programs. But we also need to make sure that we're thinking about the fuel side of things as well and bringing down the carbon intensity of fuels that are on the roads today too.
Right. Well, that's all exciting things. I love that. So what are some of the biggest challenges regarding the transition to zero emission vehicles? And how do you create a strategy that attacks those or addresses those challenges?
Yeah, I think there's three, and we're coming a long way on all three. The first is consumer knowledge, making sure that people understand that an electric vehicle can work for them, that there are vehicles of all shapes and sizes on the market today. The second is technology, right? Having technology that really does meet consumers' needs and wants. And again, I'm talking about not just passenger vehicle consumers, but fleet consumers as well. So we're seeing box trucks and fire trucks and semi trucks powered by clean, affordable energy, which is really exciting.
And mail trucks.
Yes, mail trucks, exactly.
Yes,
the vehicles
that's a big one.
Yeah, that are driving a lot of miles through our community, delivering our mail, taking our children to school.
Yes.
Yes, so technology is super important. Technology is coming a long way. Batteries are more efficient. We're able to recharge them more quickly. And then the third is, we have knowledge, we have technology. The third is accessibility. Yes. We need to make sure that these vehicles are affordable and accessible for everyone who needs them. Electric vehicles are still more expensive today than your diesel or gas counterparts.
Right.
Again, that number's coming down and we'll reach what we call cost parity soon. But I think those are the three challenges. And as the industry continues to iterate on those and solve some of those challenges, I think new little nuances in there will crop up, but we're making really good progress.
Oh, great. Well, that is great to hear. So the recently passed Clean Energy Plan has a combined $1 million of investments for clean transportation. What effect do those investments have on your work, and how can Michiganders benefit from that?
There's so much benefit to be had here in Michigan. It really changed our work from being kind of on the defense in Michigan, trying to make sure that we're not creating undue regulations on the industry, to really being progressive on the offense on how do we harness all of these benefits for Michigan. So for example, the EPA Clean School Bus Program, funded in the Federal Clean Energy Plan, is deploying millions and millions of dollars for clean school buses all across the country. Michigan was a top 3 state to receive that money in the first round of investments. And there are dozens of school districts in Michigan that weren't funded, that weren't chosen. And so we're seeing the demand for these vehicles increase quite substantially. And the benefits hit home in Michigan communities. Children riding clean school buses is really exciting.
Yeah.
And we'll really have both a public health benefit. It'll help those schools reduce their fleet maintenance and energy costs. And hopefully we're just spinning the flywheel on the demand, technology, knowledge on all of these. So,
Yes.
That's just one example of the benefits hitting home in Michigan.
I would love to see my kids ride to school on an electric school bus next year. So
Yeah.
let's hope that we can bring that to more cities
Absolutely.
in Michigan. So what can the states do? So particularly Michigan, what can we do to make sure that we're harnessing the available opportunities that Biden's clean energy plan was meant to do?
I think continuing to talk to partners. I feel like the theme of all of the industry and advocacy conferences that I've been at recently has been collaboration, collaboration, collaboration.
Very true.
These projects are complicated.
Yeah.
There's so many opportunities available, wading through all of those opportunities to see what's right for your community, what's right given, whether you work for a local government or the state or an advocacy group. And then finding all of those partners that you need to deploy.
Yes, that is
the
very
project.
important.
Yeah, thinking again, let's use school buses as an example. You need a bus provider, you need a charging station provider, you need software, you need fleet managers, you need to train your staff on how to drive and maintain those buses. You need a community that's excited to support you in doing that. And so the collaboration is going to be super important. And that's where, groups like Clean Fuels Michigan can come in. We're a trade association. We work with industry partners. We work with the state. And so let me know how I can help put those projects together.
That's good to know. That's wonderful information. So how can folks on the ground get involved with the effort with the transition to zero emission transportation?
I would say look around your community and see how your community might be able to benefit from clean transit buses, from clean school buses. Also, look internally and see, how do you drive to work? How do you get to work? If your commute is less than 100 miles there and back a day, you can drive an electric vehicle really easily. If your commute's less than 3 or 4 miles a day, maybe you can ride a bike or an e-bike or take a transit bus to work. And so I think, looking internally and seeing how you might be able to alter some of your own transportation patterns to take advantage of this technology. And then also, again, getting involved with your local organizations like EDF Action to be a good advocate on the ground and work with your community. I think it's going to be really important because, again, there's so many opportunities. And so we need good, excited people on the ground wanting to figure out how we take advantage of this.
Absolutely. And that collaboration that you mentioned is how we get that excitement level up and how we get people to really embrace this new net zero transportation initiatives. So thank you, Jane. This was all really wonderful information. I thank you for taking the time to talk with me today, and I hope we get to talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to all of our speakers today. This has been such an inspiring and engaging discussion. I really enjoyed it. I hope you all did too. We've covered a lot today. So to sum it up, I'm just going to highlight a few key takeaways. First, to achieve a clean energy transition, we need a broad array of stakeholders and advocates. We've seen from a variety of our partners today focused on solar, clean vehicles, grassroots activism, and business engagement that it takes a village to advance our clean energy goals and reach a net zero economy. EDF Action's many partners across industries, coalitions, and geographies are vital to moving this mission forward, and we must consider the perspectives of an array of partners and the innovations within many different industries to achieve the true climate progress that we need. Next, we've heard a lot about the value and benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. These historic pieces of legislation have huge positive impacts, not only for consumers and everyday people like me and you, but also for industries and businesses. From today's event, we can all see that clean energy industry is growing, and provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act are facilitating continued innovation, solutions, and technologies. And finally, our series of interviews today emphasize the need for continued action and engagement on the critical issues that we've discussed here. We need businesses, partners, and grassroots activists aligned and ready to continue the fight for climate action, for justice, and for clean energy progress. We have lots of opportunities to get involved. So to join our movement as a volunteer, visit edfaction.org/volunteer, and we will be in touch soon about volunteer activities, federal regulatory actions, and ways to get involved in your state and community. So thank you so much again for joining us today. To all of our partners and speakers, thank you again. And I hope everybody has a great Friday and a great weekend. Thanks.